It was an unusually hot morning in July 2015 when Pastor Michael Thompson set out for his daily walk by the lake. Known for his early morning routines, he would often walk for hours, sometimes talking quietly into his journal or praying under the old oak trees that lined the shore. That morning, however, something felt different. His wife, Angela, noticed him moving slower than usual, and there was a slight unease in his eyes when he kissed her goodbye. She shrugged it off, assuming he was just tired from the previous night's church service. But deep down, a flicker of worry began to take hold. By mid-morning, Michael hadn't returned. Angela's initial panic turned into frantic concern. She called his cell phone, but there was no answer. She called a few close friends, thinking maybe he had run into someone and stayed to talk. Hours passed, and the sun rose higher in the sky. The neighbors started noticing something was off when Angela ran outside, tears streaking her face, asking if anyone had seen Michael. Whispers began to circulate. Could he have had an accident? Why didn't he return? The calm of the lakeside town suddenly felt heavier, more foreboding. Search teams were quickly organized. Volunteers combed the lake's edge, flashlights cutting through the thick morning fog, while police boats skimmed the waters. The town's sheriff, a man with decades of experience, tried to keep the search orderly, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. Something about this disappearance felt different, too sudden, too precise. Michael Thompson was not the type to just vanish. He was careful, methodical, and respected by everyone. The idea that he had simply gotten lost or drowned seemed almost impossible to some who knew him well. Days passed with no sign of the pastor. His car was discovered parked near a small inlet of the lake, doors locked, keys in the ignition, and his personal belongings untouched. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The lake itself became a grim symbol of uncertainty. Some townspeople reported hearing strange noises near the water at night, splashes, whispers, or footsteps that disappeared into the darkness. Others claimed to have seen a shadowy figure moving near the lake just after Michael's disappearance. Fear and suspicion slowly crept into the community, replacing the usual summer calm with a sense of dread. The media picked up the story quickly, painting it as a tragic accident. Headlines read, "Beloved pastor missing, presumed drowned." But while the outside world accepted the narrative, the people who knew Michael best couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. Friends and family described him as cautious, careful, and deeply aware of his surroundings. He wasn't someone who would simply vanish. Even in the early days of the search, murmurs of foul play began circulating quietly, whispers of enemies, secret threats, and dark intentions. The disappearance of Pastor Michael Thompson was no ordinary mystery. It was the beginning of a story that would haunt the town for years to come. After days of searching with no trace of Pastor Michael Thompson, the authorities began to release official statements. The sheriff's office called it a tragic accident, an unfortunate drowning. They described the lake as deceptively calm but deceptively dangerous, with hidden currents that could sweep even a strong swimmer away. Local news outlets ran the story, showing pictures of the pastor smiling at community events, emphasizing his dedication and charitable work. To the public, it was heartbreaking but simple, a beloved figure gone too soon, taken by the unforgiving water. Most of the town initially accepted the narrative. People lit candles, held prayer vigils, and tried to move on with their lives. But beneath the surface, doubt lingered. Friends and parishioners remembered Michael's meticulous nature. He rarely walked alone without notifying someone, and he always carried a whistle and small flashlight, even during daytime strolls. For many, the idea that he could fall victim to the lake's currents without warning felt implausible. The more they remembered his habits, the harder it became to believe the official story. Then came the whispers. Among the congregation, some began to question whether Michael's death had been as straightforward as reported. He had been vocal about local corruption, criticizing officials for mismanaged funds, speaking out against shady real estate deals, and exposing financial irregularities within the town council. While these sermons had earned him admiration from some, they had also created enemies. A few people speculated that Michael's outspokenness had made him a target, someone powerful wanted silenced. These whispers, quiet at first, grew louder as the weeks passed, infecting the town with unease. The media coverage added another layer of tension. While newspapers and television painted a picture of an accidental drowning, independent bloggers and social media users dug into Michael's past sermons and public disputes. They began connecting dots that official reports had ignored, arguments with local politicians, threats he had mentioned during counseling sessions, and mysterious men seen near the church in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. Though no evidence had yet surfaced, these details made some wonder if the tragedy was not so accidental after all. Even the sheriff seemed unsettled behind closed doors. Publicly, he maintained the accidental drowning explanation, but confidential notes later revealed his own doubts. Officers had reported seeing unusual tire tracks near the lake and noticing that a small security camera at the park had mysteriously gone offline the night Michael disappeared. These subtle anomalies, combined with the pastor's known enemies and outspoken nature, planted a seed of suspicion that would not die. What had started as a simple story of tragedy was quietly becoming a much darker, more complicated mystery. 10 years had passed, and Pastor Michael Thompson's disappearance had become a cold case, quietly fading from national headlines but never from the memories of those who loved him. That's when Jessica Monroe, an ambitious young investigative reporter, was digging through the dusty archives of the local radio station for a story on overlooked news events. Hidden behind stacks of old microphones and reel-to-reel tapes, she found a small, unmarked box. Inside was a single cassette labeled only, "Michael Thompson, Last Recording." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the anonymity of the tape felt deliberate, as if someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. Jessica carefully dusted off the tape and inserted it into an old recorder. The static crackle of the machine filled the empty room, followed by a voice that made her heart race, Michael Thompson's voice, unmistakable and familiar. But this wasn't one of his sermons. The pastor's tone was low, urgent, almost fearful. He spoke of threats that had been made against him, of shadows moving in the town he had loved and served. Listeners could hear the unease in his voice, the pauses where he seemed to be listening for someone entering the room. Every word felt like a warning, a secret plea from the past reaching through time. The tape was more than just a recording. It was a confession, a documentation of fear. Michael spoke about meetings he had attended with anonymous sources, people who claimed to know of plans against him. He mentioned names he couldn't say out loud, warning that certain powerful figures would stop at nothing to protect themselves. Jessica could almost feel his panic, the tension in his speech rising as he explained what he knew. Each detail he revealed seemed to connect dots that no one had noticed before. Strange disappearances in nearby towns, mysterious accidents, and the timing of his own encounters with unknown men. What shocked Jessica most was the final part of the tape, recorded on a separate segment of the reel. Michael's voice dropped to a whisper, almost a shiver, as he described a meeting at the lake, the very morning he disappeared. "If I go missing," he said, "they'll make it look like the water took me, but it won't be an accident." The intensity in his voice was so real that Jessica had to pause the recording several times. Every instinct told her that this wasn't just history, this was evidence. Hidden for a decade, the tape carried a truth someone had desperately tried to bury. The implications were staggering. If the tape was genuine, then the official story of Pastor Thompson's death was not only incomplete but possibly fabricated. Jessica knew she held something explosive, something that could reopen a case that authorities had long considered closed. Her mind raced with questions. Who had hidden this tape? Why hadn't it surfaced earlier? And most importantly, what danger might she be in for uncovering it? The tape, forgotten in a dusty archive, had the power to shatter the town's quiet facade and reveal secrets that some people would kill to keep hidden. As Jessica listened further to the tape, the chilling reality of Pastor Michael Thompson's final days began to emerge. He wasn't just afraid of an accident, he was being hunted. On the recording, he described anonymous warnings he had received in the weeks before his disappearance. Strange phone calls with silence on the other end, threatening notes left at the church, and the feeling of being followed everywhere he went. His voice cracked with tension as he recalled seeing unfamiliar cars parked near his home, headlights piercing the darkness as if someone was watching, calculating his every move. The pastor spoke directly to the tape as though it were a confidant he could trust more than any living soul. He detailed a growing sense of dread, mentioning people he had once considered friends now behaving suspiciously. Meetings with local officials had turned cold and evasive. Conversations about town funds and community projects were no longer casual, they were veiled threats. Michael knew that his life was at risk because he had begun to uncover truths that others wanted buried. Each name he whispered, each story he hinted at, suggested a network of people willing to silence him to protect their secrets. Michael's fear became almost tangible as the tape continued. He recounted a specific morning when he had felt someone lurking near the lake, the very place where he would vanish days later. He described the sensation of being watched, footsteps crunching in the gravel, the sudden rustle of leaves in the wind. "They know where I am," he whispered, his voice trembling. "If I go missing, it won't be an accident. It'll be their plan. They'll make sure no one sees them." The tension in his words left Jessica staring at the recorder, unable to move, as if she could feel the unseen presence that had haunted the pastor. The recording also revealed a side of Michael no one had publicly known, a relentless determination to expose the truth, even in the face of mortal danger. He had made preparations in case the worst happened, notes hidden in the church office, coded messages in his journals, and private conversations he insisted be recorded. Every precaution he had taken was documented on this very tape. His calm reasoning, juxtaposed with moments of panic, painted a portrait of a man both brave and terrified, aware that forces beyond his control were closing in. By the end of the tape, it was clear that Michael Thompson had seen the threat coming and tried to leave evidence that would survive him. Jessica realized that this wasn't just a recording of a scared man. It was a blueprint of a crime waiting to be uncovered. Whoever had caused his disappearance had underestimated him, not knowing that he had planned for someone to eventually listen. The hidden threat wasn't just the strangers in the shadows. It was the town itself, full of secrets, lies, and dangerous people willing to bury the truth. Jessica knew she was holding the key to unraveling it all. But the question lingered. Was the danger still alive, and was it now watching her too? The moment Jessica Monroe shared the tape with the authorities, the old case file, long considered closed, was dusted off and re-examined. Detectives who had worked the disappearance a decade earlier were suddenly forced to revisit the details they had once accepted without question. The sheriff publicly expressed cautious optimism about the new evidence, but behind the scenes, a wave of unease spread through the department. Officers began poring over the original reports, noting inconsistencies in timelines, witness statements, and even the placement of Michael Thompson's belongings near the lake. Every detail that had been overlooked suddenly took on a new, sinister significance. Forensic analysts were called in to examine the evidence with modern techniques. What was once dismissed as an accidental drowning now looked suspicious. Water currents in the lake were analyzed and found to be incapable of sweeping a man's body the way it had been reported. The absence of typical drowning injuries raised further alarms. Even the small scratches on Michael's hands and arms, initially attributed to brushing against rocks or branches, were now seen as possible signs of a struggle. Every new observation added layers of doubt to the original story, and the narrative of an accident began to crumble. As the investigation reopened, journalists from around the country took notice. Social media erupted with posts and theories, fueling public interest in the pastor's death. Interviews with former town officials revealed vague recollections of unusual events surrounding the lake in 2015. Some admitted to hearing rumors of threats against Michael, but few had come forward at the time. Now, with the tape as undeniable proof, the walls of silence began to crack. People who had once stayed quiet out of fear started sharing details they had hidden for years. Each revelation hinted at a web of deceit that had protected the perpetrators while the town mourned its pastor in ignorance. Jessica's role as the reporter became more dangerous as well. Anonymous calls and cryptic messages warned her to stop digging. Someone, it seemed, was still determined to keep the past buried. But instead of deterring her, it fueled her determination. She dug into police reports, interviewed witnesses, and compared the tape's details to timelines in the case file. Small coincidences, like a neighbor seeing a suspicious vehicle near the lake that morning, suddenly aligned with what Michael had said in his final recording. Each connection pointed toward a carefully orchestrated plan, not a simple accident, and the deeper she delved, the more the town's hidden truths began to emerge. As evidence piled up, the reopening of the case became more than a procedural investigation. It became a race against time. Authorities needed to determine whether the threat that had claimed Michael Thompson's life was still active. Every new lead, every clue, carried the weight of potential danger. The tape had reopened wounds that some had tried to forget, and now the town, the media, and Jessica herself were thrust back into the shadow of a mystery that had been waiting a decade to be solved. What had once seemed like a tragic accident was revealing itself as the beginning of a story far darker and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Once the tape came to light, the town of Willow Creek could no longer pretend that everything was normal. What had seemed like a peaceful, quiet community suddenly began to unravel. Jessica Monroe's investigation uncovered whispers of corruption that had long been ignored. Missing town funds, suspicious land deals, and secret meetings held behind closed doors. People who had once smiled at the pastor's sermons now squirmed under the light of scrutiny. It became clear that Michael Thompson had been walking on dangerous ground, confronting a network of individuals who had more to lose than anyone imagined. Former town officials, when questioned, offered carefully worded statements, but many contradicted themselves. Some denied any wrongdoing outright, while others seemed to hint at knowledge of problems that Michael had uncovered. Parishioners and neighbors began sharing stories that had been whispered in private for years, moments when they saw the pastor being followed, confronted, or threatened. Every new account added pieces to a puzzle that painted a chilling picture. Michael Thompson hadn't died because of an accident. He had stumbled too close to a truth someone wanted hidden at all costs. Jessica also discovered that the pastor had kept meticulous records of his concerns, coded messages, and even photographs documenting suspicious activities. These documents revealed a network of people who had manipulated local elections, misappropriated funds, and intimidated anyone who spoke against them. Some files hinted at the involvement of outside investors with shadowy interests, suggesting that Michael's fight was bigger than the town itself. It wasn't just a small community scandal. It was a dangerous conspiracy that had festered for years, carefully masked by polite smiles and quiet nods in town meetings. Social media and national news began to amplify Jessica's findings, turning what had been a local mystery into a story of nationwide interest. People across the country were shocked to learn that a respected pastor's warnings had been ignored, and that his disappearance might have been part of a deliberate cover-up. Citizens, journalists, and even some politicians began pressuring the authorities to act, while others questioned how such corruption could go undetected for so long. Every revelation brought new tension and fear, both for those who had lived in Willow Creek and for Jessica herself, as she realized that uncovering the truth might put her in danger too. The town's secrets didn't just reveal past corruption, they hinted at ongoing threats. Unmarked cars were spotted near the church again, surveillance cameras seemed to malfunction inexplicably, and anonymous threats continued to reach Jessica. It became increasingly clear that the forces that had silenced Michael Thompson were still present, still protective of their secrets, and still willing to act against anyone who tried to reveal them. The community that had once mourned in peace was now gripped by suspicion and fear, as long-buried truths clawed their way into the light, demanding to be confronted. The final moments of the forgotten tape were the most chilling of all. Pastor Michael Thompson's voice, once confident and commanding, now trembled with fear as he spoke directly to anyone who might one day listen. He warned of people in positions of power who were willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their secrets. His words were deliberate, almost pleading. If they can make the town forget me, they can make the truth disappear too. Be careful who you trust. The whisper of fear in his voice sent shivers down Jessica's spine, and she knew instantly that this wasn't just a historical account. It was a message from beyond, a warning that resonated with danger even in the present. Michael described the steps he had taken to ensure the truth could survive, even if he did not. Hidden journals, coded messages, and secret recordings were scattered throughout the town, placed carefully to outlast him. He had trusted that someone, someday, would uncover them. Listening to him, Jessica could almost feel the tension that had gripped him in his final hours. He had lived knowing that death might come at any moment, yet he had prepared meticulously so that the story could eventually be revealed. It was as if he had known this tape would be the key to opening the town's darkest secrets. The tape also revealed Michael's deep understanding of human nature. He spoke of fear, greed, and loyalty, and how those elements could be twisted to manipulate a whole community. He described encounters with those who had once smiled at him in church but now moved like predators in the shadows. Every name he omitted, every pause he took, added to the suspense of his final warning. Even a decade later, the tension in his voice made it clear that the danger he had sensed had not dissipated. It had only grown stronger, hiding quietly behind familiar faces. As Jessica dug deeper, she began connecting the dots between Michael's warnings and the town's current events. Unexplained accidents, sudden departures, and anonymous threats all seemed linked to the same network of hidden power Michael had feared. Each clue she uncovered reinforced the pastor's words, painting a picture of a town where truth was fragile and danger was ever present. The realization hit her that Michael's message was not just about the past. It was a blueprint for understanding the forces still at work. Those who had silenced him might still be watching, waiting, and manipulating from the shadows. The final warning left more questions than answers. Michael Thompson had given everything he could to ensure that justice and truth might someday prevail, but the tape's abrupt ending created a haunting sense of incompletion. His last words were a stark reminder that some stories do not end neatly. The town's secrets, the threats, and the unanswered questions remained alive, haunting both the past and present. Jessica, holding the tape in her hands, understood the immense responsibility now placed upon her to reveal what had been hidden, confront the dangerous truths, and ensure that Michael's voice, silenced for so long, would finally be heard. Even 10 years later, the questions surrounding Pastor Michael Thompson's death remain unanswered. The tape he left behind revealed a truth too dangerous for some to confront, a warning that still echoes through the quiet streets of Willow Creek. Every discovery Jessica Monroe made exposed lies, corruption, and secrets that powerful people wanted buried forever. And yet, the more she uncovered, the clearer it became that the danger had not disappeared. It had only gone into hiding, waiting for the next misstep. The pastor's voice, once silenced, now speaks louder than ever. His warnings remind us that truth is fragile, and that those who seek justice often face shadows darker than they ever imagined. Jessica's investigation has reopened wounds, shaken a town, and challenged long-held beliefs. But it has also illuminated the courage of a man who refused to be silenced, even in the face of death. Now, the question remains, will the town finally confront the hidden forces that claimed Michael Thompson? Or will his voice fade once more into the shadows? The forgotten tape proves one thing for certain. Some secrets refuse to stay buried. And as long as there are those willing to listen, the story of Pastor Thompson will continue to haunt, to warn, and to demand the truth be told. Because some mysteries don't end, they linger. They watch, and they wait for the moment someone dares to uncover what was meant to stay hidden.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.